Aparna Watve. She's Natural Catalyst Red List Authority Coordinator, IUCN SSC Western Ghats Plant Specialist Group. Dr. Aparna Watve has a doctorate in vegetation ecology, and her research is focused on special and lesser known habitats, especially rock outcrops and conservation planning, with linkages to livelihoods and community development. Currently, she is coordinating the red listing of Western Ghat plants with a view focused conservation efforts on species in need. She teaches transdisciplinary subjects related to environment and society in various universities. She has served as a member of high-level monitoring committee of Mahabaleshwar Panchgani eco-sensitive area, and currently she is a member of the expert committee of the Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board. The IUCN SSC Western Ghat Plant Specialist Group, WGPSC, has been constituted to bring plant taxonomists, ecologists, habitat restoration experts, and other such important role players on board to start working together to increase conservation planning in this mega diverse region. They intend to share methods of assessments and standardized protocols to facilitate conservation of species and their habitats. Their mission is to improve the conservation status of wild plants in the Western Ghats. Today, she will be presenting on It's Never Too Late, Lessons from Panchgani Tableland.
Neha ma'am for making this possible. It has really been amazing listening to the presentation so far. And I loved Billy Menon's presentation. It's really a long journey for a conservation action plan like this. I will be talking about Panchgani Tableland. A lot of people know it, at least from the Hindi movies. It is at the center of Panchgani town, which is part of the Mahabaleshwar typical tourism spot. And I'm actually speaking on behalf of a lot of people concerned about conservation of rocky plateaus, which are highly specialized habitats. So we have a network, rock outcrop network as we call it, which works on SADA ecosystem, which is the rocky plateaus. The conservation leaders in this case were Bombay Environmental Action Group. They have been campaigning for conservation of Mahabaleshwar Panchgani for several years now, almost 40 years. And what are the lessons? I'll just tell you on the way. So coming to Panchgani, Panchgani Tableland is it's a wild area, but in the heart of a developing hill tourism location. It's a small city actually. It's been established from the British time. Mahabaleshwar Panchgani was declared as an ecologically sensitive zone sometime in 2000, in which the tableland became a conservation zone with certain development regulations. It is also on the list of natural heritage site of the state for various unique values. And my association with Panchgani started sometime very early, around 1993 or so, just as a student of botany, because we used to be taken there for field work. But then more formally, when I became involved as an ecologist from sometime around 2005. So it's a period of almost 15 years or so, consistently understanding what is happening at Panchgani and trying to sort of make it go towards a certain design and conservation. So Panchgani tableland, as you can see, is part of 5 plateaus. That's why it's Panchgani. And all the 5 plateaus are interesting from the ecologist point of view. They all have rare and endemic and threatened species. They have some very specialized geological features. But among this, Panchgani tableland is one of the largest, and it's really like a jewel. So there are certain things on Panchgani which make it unique among the 5 plateaus. Because this is a question that was often asked to us along the ways. Why only Panchgani tableland? Why not the other 4? And that is because of some of the unique values. And what are the unique values? Is one is this mass blooming phenomenon, which has been documented right from the 1820s. So Father Plato, who was the first botanist to study this area, he has written about the beautiful carpets of white and blue dots of flowers around he has talked about endemic and threatened species from 1823. If I remember, the paper is from 1823. So very often it happens that when we start on restoration program, we don't have a documented scientific history or of what the ecology was long time back. But here we were fortunate enough because this was a British-dominated hill spot, tourism spot. We had a very accurate description by one of the greatest botanists in this region. So this vegetation is pretty unique. It consists of dominance of carnivorous plants. All the blue spots you see are the carnivorous plants, and that is a speciality of the rocky plateau vegetation. Then this site has got its name for about 6 species of plants. So Habenaria panchganensis, Euphorbia panchganensis, these are endemic species, very rare. They are seen only on the plateaus, and they were first described from this tableland. That's what makes it very exciting for a botanist to see them here. It's like, seeing a treasure. So, Panchgani tableland also has very interesting geological features. So, it has been also studied by geologists and geomorphologists who were trying to understand Western Ghats. It has got two lateritic caves, and they have their own flora of ferns and mosses. Again, many of them are endemic and rare. So, these are the ecological values and some of the quite unique features which make it very important for ecologists uh, to study this area. But it is also a tourist spot, and tourists do not come here. A normal tourist that comes here does not come for all these ecological things. They come for the beautiful views. They come for the open, air, fresh air, something that they have associations from in the childhood. They have run about here, or they have seen it Bollywood films. And the Rocky Plateau ecosystem is such that all the things that I was showing you, they can be seen only for the 4 months of monsoon. Beyond that, Panchgani tableland looks like any other open grazing or grassland area, or actually a barren area. I mean, I won't be surprised if people think that it's a bare ground. People play football on it, people play cricket on it. But a tourist comes here with an expectation to see beautiful views. They don't come to see wildflowers. Whereas in case of Kars Plateau, which is just the other plateau, which is natural heritage site also, people have been told about the wildflower beauty and they come to see that. That is not there for for Panchgani. And Panchgani gets almost 2 to 3 lakh of tourists per year. It's a major tourist destination, and the council, Panchgani Council, which owns this, collects somewhat of tax on it, uh, which is almost 10 rupees per head or even more at times. And it's a good economic opportunity for people to have little businesses here. So in 2005, all the tourism and all the other infrastructure that was associated with tourism had already encroached on the Panchgani table. And although it had all the conservation prescriptions, they were supported by the laws, but the council was really not able to implement any of them because of the very high commercial interest. And this is what was happening on tableland. And there was nothing, it looked as if there was nothing that one can do to stop it. So tourism was rapidly becoming more and more commercial. There was a toy train, there was a ferry wheel, and it was like treated like any other, chapati kind of thing. There was also this balloon ride, so jeeps were riding on it. People were having motorcycle races because it was thought of as a open ground, not something special, not something worth, conservation from ecological point of view. And the caves, we had known as zoologists that it has some rare endemic bat species, but that cave was one of the cave were turned into a restaurant, one was made into a little temple. And these were kind of features that people were trying to introduce to draw more and more tourists of a certain nature. All of this was leading towards a lot of garbage. Solid waste management was non-existent, and it had other issues. Invasive species had started coming in, and it almost looked like whatever historical facts that we knew were going to remain in history, and we would not see the real unique features of Panchgani tableland anymore. Bombay Environmental Action Group had consistently been going to the court, and they were trying very hard to limit these commercializations. And through various class actions and whatever other things, they had managed to get Panchgani divided into two parts as mutual, by mutual consent. That there was a 20-acre area, which you can see below, the southward part of it, which would be the only part allowed for commercialization, and 80-acre area would be given for conservation. And again, this went on from 2005 to 2012. So even when the court had already given an order, there was no follow-up of that order. There was no implementation, and again, more and more petitions were filed, and people were named, and it was like a blame game that you did this, you did that, and it went on and on. And in 2012, something changed, and that was a sad incident where an accident happened, and a girl died and a horse died, and it was really sad. And then it was brought to the notice of Panchgani Council that you are supporting something which is totally illegal by just not doing it. So it's time that you acted. And since then, 2012, Panchgani Municipal Council and all the members of it, they became very much involved towards conservation, and we started a conservation. By that time, there was only this one plan which was made by a committee constituted sometime early, in which they had shown that one part would be used for parking in the 20 acres, and other part would be used for commercial facilities. And there would be certain other developments on the 80-acre land, the big piece of land. And there would be ponds. There are already ponds, but they wanted to make them bigger, and certain other things were put there. And this is where I was asked, what is my opinion as an ecologist? So it took some time for me to understand this, because again, I'm not a architect person, I'm not a planner, and I knew Panchgani from a very different perspective. And for me, it was all very foreign. And I said, how could you even give away these 20 acres? Because that means that much less for conservation. Because we know, as ecologists, we think that this is irreplaceable. And how could you give away this much? So then it dawned upon us that so far in all the narrative, these two sides had completely, gone parallel. The planning was going on its own, and the ecologists were doing their studies on their own with no bridge between them. So whatever I was saying is important was not even known. Even when the area was listed as heritage site, there was no documentation of actually what are the unique values. So for example, when you are doing UNESCO Natural Heritage Site, there is a documentation of what are the unique values, which had never been done for Panchgani. And we thought that this is a time when we start building those bridges. That was a time when all the stakeholders started coming together. The biggest stakeholders were the local businessmen, the cart owners, the horse owners who have been riding there, uh, various little stalls. There were some fruit walas and ice fruit candy walas and butta walas and photographers. All these were local businessmen, mostly united under a businessmen's association, the Panchgani Tableland Businessmen's Association. And they were the biggest stakeholders because they had economic gains from that. The Panchgani Municipal Corporation, which was technically the landowner, and they were the administrative authority, so it was their job to look after this. Tourists who were coming there obviously were very important, because you cannot say from today onwards tableland will be closed to tourists. Okay, tableland exists because of the tourism and its value, and therefore there was no way of closing it saying, okay, now today onwards it will be only for ecology. We had to include the very dominant tourist aspect into that. Environmental organizations, very few, except Bombay Environmental Action Group, nobody was really giving so much of time and energy into this. But BAG had been consistently supporting. Local environmentalists, at that time, there were very few. Biodiversity scientists who had been studying this, they had their say, but and conservationists like some of us who were talking on behalf of flora and fauna. So the real say in this matter was of the local businessmen, and they had the biggest stakes, and then of course the Panchgani Corporation. The conservationists, biodiversity scientists basically were kind of in the background till then. And when we started holding these meetings and talking with the stakeholders on field in meetings, and okay, you can see me and Hema, who's towards the left, the lawyer of BAG, both looking very young and innocent because for us it was quite new and we were being bombarded from all sides about how Panchgani is important for us, for economy, for livelihoods. And there was a kind of consistent story that whatever you are saying is in the past. The tableland was at its glory in the past, at the British time. Now it's not there anymore. So let us use it for commercial purposes. Let us give it to us for livelihoods. That was the kind of theme that was emerging, and uh, it was very difficult for us to accept that because we could see some of the species around. And uh, if you go to tableland anytime except the monsoon, it does look very barren. And people's view was based on that it is, a completely neglected area, degraded area. In one of the meetings, something happened, and I think that changed my perspective. So there was one person, Mona Patra, who's resident of Panchgani, and in the meeting, I was talking about Panchgani, and I said Panchgani is a dead plateau because of all these, activities. It is so degraded, it's so dead now. Mona was the one who said, Aparna, I think you are wrong. And she said something which really changed our perspective. She said, we are looking at scientists as a doctor. If a patient is brought to a doctor, doctor doesn't say the patient is going to die. The doctor will do all in his or her capacity to save the patient. If you say there is one plant, if you say there is one flower, there is some insect, how can you say that the plateau is dead? It hurts us because we have been seeing this plateau right from the childhood and we really don't want it to die. So if you can do something as a scientist, this is the time to, use your science and do something because we all know, we can see also that it's degraded, but we want to make it better. And I think that is something where my whole training as ecologist kind of crumbled because I had been brought up to think only of the past. And I agree that as botanists, especially taxonomists and ecologists, we often get so much into the past that we forget that there can be a future if we act. And that action is very important. So here, this whole thing changed, and we said, okay, we understand, and we need to now start thinking about what needs to be done later. So one of the first thing that we said was that we can't give a decision immediately. We need to do a study, and we did a study of uh, what are the ecological issues that the Panchgani tableland right now has. So it was like a ecological concern matrix. So what is the concern? What is the kind of threat? So for example, if my concern is that there is habitat destruction, what is the source or that threat, or what is the origin of that threat? What exactly is getting impacted? If I say habitat is impacted, is the pond getting impacted? Is the bare rock getting impacted? What is it? So a little description of that. What is the effect of that threat and how we can mitigate it at short term and long term? And also very important, what are my indicators for understanding this process? What is my indicator for monitoring? So these were the questions that I think we had to even generate to start with so that we could monitor this whole process as ecologists. Um, so we kept on, dividing different impacts which we got from the stakeholders. So One thing was great that all the stakeholders had a lot of information to share because each one had been to the tableland, walked on it, seen it from past, had some ideas about it. So it was our job, and that's why I said natural catalyst. It was my job as an ecologist to kind of give it or put it in a framework where we could start working on it. We could start designing the actions. So I won't go into all the details. I just focus on some specific things. One of this was we were looking at impact of tourists, and one was people walking on it. And when we noticed, we saw that the footpaths where people have been walking for quite some time actually are not having a major impact. So it's a minimum disturbance, something that could be managed by changing the way people walk or changing the way we can design this. The other activity which was quite a bit of destructive activity, or it felt like it right in the beginning, was the horse ride, because horse riding is something which is almost part of culture of Panchgani. But the number of horses kept growing and they were causing more and more disturbance. But when we studied it carefully, what we saw that even after disturbance by horses riding, the habitat is able to recover on its own. So this is a little thing that we had, that we marked how the horses are moving, or we talked to the house owners about how they take the tourists around, and then we checked the ecology and we realized that horses would not be a problem as long as their numbers are controlled and their movement is controlled. So right now what we have done is we have designated a path for the horses to go. The number of horses totally is limited to 70, which are licensed. And because of that, at any point of time, there would be maybe just 15 to 20 horses on the tableland, which takes care of the livelihoods of the people. Because we did not really want to, hurt anybody. We realize that these livelihoods are something that can go. Also, if you are allowing 3 lakh people to walk on tableland, 70 horses do not make much of a difference as long as you are able to guide it. So it comes to design, which we have now, of how they will move on to the tableland. We also looked at some of the past areas which had been degraded, and we realized that habitat to some extent is able to recolonize, or it is able to take over the land if it is left free of disturbance for quite some time. So this was something very tricky. We realized that some of the species are able to do it, some are not. So for us, in the next step, we have to make sure that we focus on species which are not able to recolonize or restore on their own. So that would be our focus. And the most difficult thing was the horse carts, because they were having a very, very heavy impact. For various reasons, it was changing the nature of tourism. It was making it more and more exploitative, and they could they needed roads to run, and that was leading to fragmentation of the conservation area. And areas such as this were not able to recover easily. So it would have needed a lot of technical effort to get it restored, which we are doing right now. But next year, if the carts were running, it would have again destroyed the area. So we realized that this is something that we need to control with a very heavy hand. And the court supported this decision after long, long discussions and my going to the court discussing all this also. That finally the horse carts are allowed to ply only on the lower part, 20 acre, which was originally marked for them, and they would not be able to drive here, which is going to give us a breathing time for restoration of this. So in 2019, this decision came from High Court. It was supported by Supreme Court because some of the petitioners had gone there, and now we have this situation where we can actually see that the vegetation has started regenerating because of the reduction of the movement of various horse carts here. 2021, because of the COVID, we could see how soon the habitat comes out. So that's why I said it's never too late. And it is something that I would not have imagined, but we could see a lot of species coming back and take over their original area. And this is a whole group of stakeholders and people who are involved. No more young, no more innocent, but it took all of us time to gel together and start working with a common vision. So, from the Panchgani Council administrative authorities to the Coast Guard owners and to the high level monitoring committee members, all of us basically are now of one vision, and uh, we have started with the restoration activities from last 2 years. It is divided into three areas. The blue part is where restoration can happen on its own. We want to accelerate restoration for some of the really rare and fragile species like the Habenaria panchgalensis and all. They need certain support. The yellow area is where there is a lot of tourist movement, so we need to take some different kind of measures. We might have to do a little plantation or do a little cordoning of the area that is undergoing activities. And the 20 acres area, the red and orange zone, although they are to be used for commercial activities, we have put a rider saying that that area is also important for biodiversity. So the commercial activity should not at any point of time overpower the biodiversity values. And we are looking at some targets, how the natural vegetation should come back, and these will be our monitoring points. It should not be fragmented anymore. That is written down in the conservation plan. And our indicators include the birds, because there used to be nesting of birds, and that would be seen as a sign of recovery if they come back. Herpetofauna, snakes, amphibians, aquatic fauna such as this, which is very endemic and threatened, they need to recover. Their population need to be coming back to the certain breeding population level. Those are our indicators. Those will not be seen by the visitors at all. I'm sure the tourists are not going to go and search this out anymore, but they would be our recovery indicators. So mosses coming back, lichens coming back. This is something that we are monitoring, and we have a short-term and long-term plan in place now for that. And we hope that Panchgani Council, which is now completely taken over this responsibility and is building an interpretation center and is making tourists aware of the natural aspects of this plateau, I think they will surely take this forward, and we remain all as supporters and actual, ground uh, ground team as such. So, thank you so much for this. I have to talk about Panchgani Municipal Council. Their change in this was phenomenal, and I really appreciate all the CEOs who have been working on this. We have a landscape architect who's been involved, and his passion, Ravi Kadam sir from Integrate, his passion is very different because he is a resident of Panchgani. He knows the tableland from childhood, and that's why he has put efforts and energy into the design of this and into the action of it. And it made a great difference because he was the one who could, talk to all the stakeholders, and he took personal interest in this and has some amazing ideas for the future also. And BAG, of course, which will continue to monitor this.
Yeah, there is comment from Piyush Seksaria. Thank you, Aparna. And he's asking, what role do you see in other similar ecosystems?
Piyush, I think we have to go from case to case basis, because in Panchgani we had to convince people of ecological values, whereas in a place like Kas, people were already convinced, and they were focusing on only wild tasks. So our role there would be different, to talk about other issues and talk about, whether tourism can be allowed in certain areas or not. So I think there is no single answer to this. Again, role of an ecologist should be as a catalyst to put all these things together, to put all the perspectives together into the future planning. I think that's my only answer.
Okay. Manjari ma'am says, Aparna, a wonderful insight into Panchgani tableland. Please tell us a little about the algae named after you.
Actually, Manjari ma'am, I can't really tell you more about it because it's really tiny. It's a diatom and it is named from Cas, and I mean it's just something that Dr. Karthik Bala and his team did, and I think more than me, it celebrates the habitat. I don't think I have much more to say about this.
Yeah, but it's really yeah, very good to. It's really a proud thing for us. Yeah, Kumareshwari is saying, interesting session, ma'am. It took us to Panchgani. Thank you for the beautiful presentation on tableland. So apart from vegetation and birds, what are the hydrological changes observed and how geological value of the land is observed and action taken?
Okay. So, first the hydrological. So, we did not have a study specifically on that, but there is a separate study which was done by Dr. Jared Bono. And what he had said is that there were springs, lateritic springs, right at the bottom of the hill slope around the Panchgani tableland, which had which were perennial ones but had started drying up because of the loss of vegetation along the hill slopes. So there are two parts of Panchgani Hill Slope. One towards north is actually very well managed by Grampari, and they have restored a forest. It's beautifully done restoration. And there you have water body, perennial water sources there. But the eastern slope, it was not part of this specific restoration. However, the council is working on restoration of it and trying to restore the streams also which are there. So that's a separate study as such. Um, the other thing about apart from vegetation, what are the geological? Yeah. So geological value of this is there are two things. One is the rock surface there, and plus Panchgani has some curious things about the amount of soil on the plateau. So it's one of the I think the only plateaus which has such a huge layer of soil, and geologists have been working on it. And what was happening was that that soil was being dug up and spread all over the plateau just to make it flat. So that has been stopped. So we have said that that should not be done, and don't try to cover the bare rock at all because that is natural. The two ponds that were there are partially man-made, and all the plateaus have depressions, but here they have tried to deepen it. And there's a little pond and all. So we have said that whatever is done. Don't do it anymore because they had some ideas that there will be kayaking in that, and just as a part of beautification that we have said no, it's already beautiful enough, but it's also very important for the water birds who come in at times, and also important for the amphibians. So there are certain ways in which the pond has been treated now. All the solid waste has been removed, and council is very active about it, and they have even won an award this year and even before that for the cleanest of the councils. So that is happening on its own. Uh, the caves, unfortunately, the restaurant there cannot go, but we are figuring out how we can minimize the impact of that and how the bats can kind of recolonize it as part of their habitat. But that is something that's again a different legal battle. I don't think we will go into that right now.
Okay, Swati ma'am says, great work, Aparna. What was the role of the plateaus traditionally and how these were part of people lives?
Uh, in general, plateaus have been very important as primary watersheds, and it's often seen that the plateau surface kind of takes up water as sponge, and the water comes out from streams around or from the springs around, perennial springs around that. So that was one. Second was fodder. In this case, in Panchgani, actually, we have some people who talk that about even 40 years back or so, they used to collect grass from the tableland for fodder for their local cattle. And at times, the nomadic Dhangar community comes there and they walk on the plateau. But that has been reducing because the tourism is there throughout the year. So that does not happen anymore at Panchgani. There used to be certain medicinal plants, and people would go and collect there. So there is one species of Iphigenia, two species of Iphigenia which have been collected. There is a euphorbia which I showed that was collected for medicinal plants. That has reduced. So that was collected and used in some local medicine. That is not happening anymore.
Okay, in continuation or on the similar lines, Anand Datta sir is asking, from your experience, how effective responses or initiatives by local communities can be? Do you think the rules and regulations that society may accept and impose by themselves in such project can be successful in long term, or it is a bit more ideal expectation, especially across generations?
Uh, you know, uh, again, being older and more seasoned, I think we cannot depend on any one answer. So what we have been trying wherever we are working is to try everything and try to get a social support, a legal support to the ecological conservation action. Because here in this case, we could stop the destructive activities only because it was already legally notified. It if we had to start by making a law or a policy, it would not have worked because the plateau would have been seen as too far gone for this. Uh, Local community, uh, it's not just one entity, there are many people in that, and there is a political aspect of it which we have to understand. So political ecology, now people know it very well. So there were some players, or there are some players very often who have large stakes and who have a dominating role in the community, and they would push for their say. And if that say supports ecology, you're lucky. If that say is against ecology, then you have to fight the fight. Like, this happened in this case. Uh, but to turn everybody's view towards a certain self-regulatory action would take time, and ecology does not very often have that time. So therefore, we have to make use of law, especially when it is a public space like this. One of the reasons that we could, struggle like this was, or we had to struggle like this. Both are true. Is that this is not forest land. In forest land, conservation of ecology would have been a lot more easier because the laws are designed for that. But this is a public space within a revenue land. So therefore, it needed a specific legal support like a conservation zone or something to make it happen. Just people on their own can do it, provided they are aware enough of the ecological value. So in future, I think what we should concentrate on is creating this common consensus about a use of certain area, at least for the public areas. Maybe not for the private, it might be too difficult. Here, it worked. But we can't, I mean, as you have said, the generations change, and we really don't know how the politics will play out in future. Currently, we do have a lot of environmental lobby support. We do have a lot of interest in the environment, but uh, a law, I think, is a must.
Yeah, Shishir Rawar sir is asking, Aparna ji, firstly is appreciating your presentation. Your presentation was explained, has explained the issues and processes very nicely with indicators and outcomes. He has questions: how to encourage or work with the local, district, and state governments about being proactive rather than reactive in such a situation. Often, state biodiversity boards also have to toe the political mandate and remain ineffective. What is your experience, and what are your suggestions to address this issue?
Uh, I really don't have anything that I can say on a general basis, but I think it's very important that one keeps on working from a local perspective. And district and state governments might be slow to respond, but they have a machinery which, if you can, set it in motion, it does its work. That's what they are meant for. So, but changing the mindset of person sitting at that table, I think that is very important. Uh, One thing that one can use is this localizing of sustainable development goals, because that is something expected that every council, every gram panchayat kind of internalizes this, and maybe that is some way in which one can try that. Also, we have to understand that they are under a lot of pressure from the local community, and obviously the issues of people are often considered more important than issues of, say, one bird or one little snake something. So I totally understand that whether they think personally if it's important or not, they have to act in a certain manner as a system. So for us is to integrate our goals of conservation or a certain kind of sustainable design into that and get it recognized on a wider scale. Mm, Politicians again, they keep changing because they are basically reflecting the views of the people. So if we have enough support in people to do something, they will change, which has happened in case of Panchgani. Fingers crossed, at least for a while. I don't know whether it will remain because it's something that has to keep on happening. But I
Yes.
feel that it's very important that whoever is doing this has to have his or her foot on the ground there. What we could do in case of Panchgani was possible because there were so many people from Panchgani who were directly or indirectly involved. I can't go and do it in, say, Rajasthan or Delhi directly. Why would anybody just do it? So one has to have a lot of ground perspective also. And politicians, I think it's a I don't have answers to that. I think some of them are really very well aware. So right now I've heard that the tourism and environment minister is very supportive, and they have supported Mahabaleshwar and Panchgani ecological conservation on the large scale. I hope that remains.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. There is a question from Sanjeev Jagtap. In the area earmarked for natural restoration, what kind of protection measures put in place to avoid human disturbances or tourists going there? On the similar lines, Vaidehi also has the question that uh, how is the footfall of crowd visiting the place was controlled? What all measures were taken to avoid excess number of people at the same time, leading to ecological deterioration?
So at the moment, we have not done anything aggressive, which will, cause certain conflicts there because people come there to expect a lot of open spaces and to be able to move about. But what you're saying is very important that we need to do something, especially for area where we are trying to actively restore. So we are thinking for 2 years we had no issues because there were no tourists because of COVID restrictions. And there were 4 guards employed there by the council who were telling the people to walk along a certain path, and that was enough. Whoever was coming, there were very few tourists, so they were told or guided on certain paths, and that actually worked. So we are hoping that we will try and formalize a little bit. So there will be a path from where people will walk in, and then they will be guided onto a certain path, which today we have marked on plateau. It doesn't look really nice because there are cement boulders, but it has to do its purpose of guiding people. And what we realize that majority of the tourists prefer to walk on a path if it's designated, and they're kind of non-aggressively pushed towards those paths, and they come for some specific views, and if they get those views, or actually if they can do their TikTok videos in front of the wild flowers, that's enough for them. They won't directly go into this and roll on it, at least in now. So the approach of the council so far has been to do it very nicely and non-aggressively. And another thing that we want to do is use some temporary netting to cordon off certain area and do it in such a manner and have the guards tell people of what is being done. We hope to get help from all the ecological tour operators or something who can come and explain what is being done. So the restoration itself becomes a point of tourism. That's maybe it's a little idealistic, but we want to try it this year. And there are certain areas where tourists will be allowed to go. We need people to understand what is going on. We need people to develop that. So that is something I feel is important. Uh, and
Yeah.
there is another question of restoration project for degraded forest patches. Along the Panchgani table, and as I said, on the eastern side, they are starting that, and on some other places also.
Yeah. Dhanashri Kulkarni is asking, are there any awareness programs conducted especially for tourists about the eco-sensitivity of this park?
Not yet. All this is supposed to be part of the Ecological Interpretation Center, which is being designed right now. And there is a film. So council has developed a film, about 15 minutes film, which will show tableland in its glory. And uh, I mean, I've seen cuts of that, and it's amazing. Uh, Drone shooting of that place when it's full in blue. I think that will be a very compelling thing about why it's being done. There's also a handbook which is coming out, which is designed by Ranva for the council, and that will have information about what is being happening and what are the key values and how tourists should behave on this. What would be what we call responsible tourism, not to trample this. So we're constantly trying to say, rather than saying don't do this, we are trying to say do this. So go and see this. If you we even think that okay, there are certain areas where a lot of weeds are there, so maybe we'll have a drive where tourists come and uproot the weeds just as a part of the exercise of understanding tableland. All this is not new. You know, it has been done a lot abroad and in Europe and UK and US. There are regular efforts by councils to involve people into restoration projects. It just sounds new to us, but let's hope that it works.
Yeah, Dasmana says wonderful work. It is so difficult to get the society around to conserve. Please let us know the diversity of plant species on the tabletop.
Okay, so diversity wise, the total species number would go about 200. It's a 100-acre area only. No? Just remember that. So 200 or so maybe plant species. Forget the weeds. There would be about 10 to 20 weeds which are very aggressive. Out of this, 47 are endemics, out of which about 15 are already on the threatened list. All are herbaceous, or they are perennial herbs or ephemeral herbs. Both plants are there. That's the kind of plant diversity. And there are some species which are reported only from Panchgani tableland. So there are two species of aquatic ferns, isoetis, only from Panchgani tableland.
Priyanka Gate is asking whether there are any specific strategies implemented for plateau restoration with respect to avifaunal species on site.
No, not yet. In fact, I think we need to do some more studies on how do we bring back the lark nesting. Larks do come there, but how do we bring back the lark nesting? No, so we don't have a specific strategy at the moment, but I have a feeling that by reducing the disturbance, some things are kind of already, eyeing the plateau. We saw some aquatic birds this year. They were using the pond, so that's a positive sign.
Yeah. Piyush Sexaria sir is asking what, in addition to the role of ecologist, what role do you see for the community of landscape architects or planners?
I think their role is really the key role. Uh, in fact, I think ecology should merge into that. I don't think that on our own ecologist we have the training necessary to do the design and plan that you have. We can give certain monitors or indicators or something, but actual job is of a landscape planner. And right now I feel that what you all are doing is wonderful because you are bringing that ecological aspect into planning. And I hope that grows more and more. Also, I think what you need to tell the ecologists or others is the the importance of a view, which was my personal gain in this, that as ecologists we are not understanding the aesthetic aspect, or we're trained not to look at the aesthetics or beauty or view or perspective or anything like that. But I realized that when I'm appreciating, say, a natural area, in my mind there is an aesthetic value to it which I'm not verbalizing or which I'm not putting into my ecology paper, but it is there. That is something that I think the landscape designers need to bring into the ecological planning, that there is a certain view in all this, and to appreciate and integrate that into the plan. I think that's what I can suggest.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So the role of aesthetics is what you are aptly saying. There are few responses for your answers in the chat box. Maybe you can go through them later
Sure.
on. Thank you, ma'am, for your fantastic presentation.